Lovely. So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Data Sharing in the Public Sector, which will be led by Dave Parsons and Andrew Harvey. Just got a few things to go through before we start. My name is Megan. I'm the training manager here at DPAS. We offer a number of training and services we've got audit, subject access requests and DPO services. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a code for all attendees to gain 20% off further training. We are also hosting a free to attend conference in February in Bristol. So just check out our LinkedIn and our website for more details on that. Then we've just got a couple of housekeeping things to go through. So any questions you have, please use the chat function, and Dave and Andrew will keep an eye and get around as many as they can. Just so you're aware, the webinar is being recorded, so you can catch up on our YouTube channel later. It'll be put up a bit later on. It should last around an hour. And then after the webinar, we'll send out a feedback survey. So if you can all fill that out, that'd be great, good and bad. It just helps us for further webinars. So I'm now going to hand you over to our speakers, Dave and Andrew, who will start the webinar off for us.
Thanks very much, Megan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Parsons. I'm the Wales Accord on the Sharing of Personal Information Corps Manager, bit of a mouthful for everybody this morning. And I work within Digital Health and Care Wales. I'll hand over to Andrew.
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, my name is Andrew Harvey. I'm the Joint Head of Information Governance and Data Protection Officer at Guy's and St Thomas's and King's College Hospitals NHS Foundation Trusts. I've just come back into the NHS after a couple of years out, and previously worked in an ICB, Integrated Care Board, and another NHS trust for 7 or 8 years. So I think you've got the NHS Dream Team here for you this morning.
No pressure at all, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Before we start, I mean, one of the key things I wanted to get us all to kind of participate in is just think about things from our own personal perspectives. And there's a reason for this, is because a lot of things that we see from data sharing and failures and some of the challenges and risks sometimes combinate, and majority of times combinate from individuals and us as people. Making things a bit more personal sometimes helps us realize the importance of what we do every day as individuals. And we can bring that into our professional side of things. So we've got a couple of questions there that we're just going to ask people. And hopefully you can use the chat feature to put a couple of comments in there as well to answer these. So the first question that I've got is, most of us have social media of some sort. How many of us actually display things on any of our social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, that display things that include our date of birth? So that could be that you put the details in there so it knows when your birthday is. Or perhaps where you post a picture up on your birthday, or as what happens in my case, it's usually a member of the family posts up a picture of happy birthday, Davey, 42 today. That was last week. I just wondered, you know, and feel free, put some answers in the chat as a yes or no. Do you do it? It'd be very interesting to see what kind of responses we get back from people. Similarly with the second question that I've got, do any of you have pets? Children? Do you name these on social media? Again, let's just get some answers from people. I'm quite interested to see what that looks like. Usually in a face-to-face type of setting, I'd ask people to raise their hands at this point in time. But quite often you will see, and I can see lots of yeses coming through already.
I say lots of yeses coming in there.
But it's something that happens, and sometimes it's not generally something that you might do, but it could be, as I mentioned in my instance, it could be a family member perhaps doing it as well. Secondary to that, then, let's just answer the final question. So who uses a PIN for their mobile phone, a banking app, any other type of app you might have that might relate to a significant date? So that could be a date of birth, your child's date of birth. No, we've got lots of no's. That's good. I'm not going to lie, I used to. I'll be quite honest around it, because it's an easy thing for people to remember. But the reason I asked those 3 questions, I guess, is that take the first 2, social media and putting on, dates of birth, putting on names of pets or children. That's a way of us actually personally sharing information out into, yes, probably friend connections. If we've not set the right privacy settings, perhaps it's a little bit further afield than that. But we do, it's something that's a natural thing that we do. Just bear that in mind as we go through this morning and we talk around some of the key challenges that we have, some of the things that happen, and when we talk around some of the barriers and things that can actually help support us as well. So just bear that in mind. If we head to the next slide, I just want
there was a real split of yeses and nos there. Almost an even split. I mean, I didn't count, but it was almost an even split.
It's a shame we haven't got people in front of us, Andrew, and we could actually count the hands in the air. But yeah, no, it's interesting to see, and particularly what's good is seeing that change in culture that we've now got with people and PIN numbers in particular, because that used to be a real common theme. Anyone from my team that's watching this will probably still laugh because they all know my PIN number from last week to access my laptop, which I had to change, but they were able to guess it, which just goes to show that sometimes we don't all think in the most logical way. A lot of the failures that we see, and this goes back well past 20 years. I picked up a couple here that were quite prominent when I first started in the world of information governance. So the first one for me was actually the 7/7 bombings and the reports that came through that, and some of the poor standards of information sharing and intelligence sharing that didn't take place. And then just after that, we had the Baby P scandal and the failures that were identified by agencies. But even prior to that, things were happening. They were failures. The Soham murders, for example, intelligence that was known across agencies and information not shared. I mean, more recently, from a Welsh perspective, I guess, we had the young boy in Bridgend who was murdered, and the data sharing failures that came from that report. And even recently, as far as just a fortnight ago, we had some reports released in Wales, and you may have seen it in the wider news headlines in relation to a head teacher in North Wales. And even that report, it had multiple missed opportunities. I mean, you read the reports, and that's all you constantly see after each paragraph is this was a missed opportunity, this was a missed opportunity. Unfortunately, these are everyday things that happen. And one of the things that I always will focus on information sharing and when we're talking around it is that actually the law is there to help us and to be an enabler. And the majority of you will all be information governance professionals, data protection professionals, and it's actually our responsibilities within our organizations to help encourage, educate, and provide confidence to our practitioners that we can do things. Data protection, as I say, it is an enabler. It's not the barrier, but how often, and again, let's just have some answers perhaps in the chat. How often have you come across someone that said, I can't do this, or we can't do this because of data protection? We've all come across it. It's probably something that you come across every day, because sometimes it's far too easy for someone to say, yeah, data protection, GDPR says no. Because it's easier for somebody to use that as a reason to not do something. And in a lot of those cases that were on those headlines just now, that was actually the case, where it might not have been the thing that the silver bullet of preventing those things from happening. It wouldn't have been in most of the cases. But even if information had been shared with an agency in relation to any one of those cases at a particular point in time where it wasn't, it could have made the difference. And that is the driving force behind what we do. It's certainly the driving force behind what I do and what I lead from a national perspective, because if we can just do one thing in one case, it could make a difference. And that's what we've got to instill into our practitioners, is confidence to actually do things.
And I think that's a mood that's changed, hasn't it, Dave? You know, certainly I don't have any statistics on it, but certainly an empirical feel that I have is that, you know, from 15, 20 years ago, whenever it was I started working in information governance and data protection, people were absolutely scared stiff to share information because they thought they were going to be held up. But there's been a slow shift over that time that people are more willing to do it.
Yeah, definitely concur with that, Andrew. I mean, yeah, over time there has been definitely a cultural shift change in this. I mean, if you look back at those headlines that we displayed in that last slide, you don't see a headline on there being the Information Commissioner's Office finding or taking enforcement action against an organisation for sharing information in relation to safeguarding.
No.
Because the very real reality is, and I think we both used this quote on a number of sessions we've done in the past, where would we rather be? Would we rather be stood in front of the commissioner, the regulator, or in front of the coroner? And that's the very real reality, is that the ICO will not find an organisation where we've done something where it had a purpose, it had a clear purpose, and we had a rationale behind it. And they certainly won't come down on an organisation for doing something around, particularly from a safeguarding perspective. So it's not giving everybody that free rein to do whatever you want, but it's just to instill that confidence in practitioners, because I think more often than not, and I can vouch for many years working in local government, social workers in particular, those types of practitioners will be scared of getting something wrong. And we've got to give them that confidence as practitioners that sometimes, you know, other things come before data protection, but also that the law actually is there to help us do things. So the majority of the time, when it comes to vital interests, when it comes to safeguarding, there'll always be a lawful basis that we can rely upon for doing something. And that's the enabler, that's the enabling part. What I would tend to advise to any practitioners really is to consider a number of things. When it comes to information sharing, consider what the information is. What are the benefits for sharing it? Do I need to share everything that perhaps sometimes would be, you know, that on that wish list? Because often you'll have, you know, a data set, and actually there's only particular information that might be required as part of that, not the wider stuff. So always consider what's relevant, what's proportionate. Be clear about risks, be clear about who's responsible. And I think that's a really important one actually for lots of organizations now, where we're working far more in collaboration, where we've got a lot of partnership working. You know, be clear around that role and responsibility. You know, joint data controller arrangements are becoming a far more common thing now. Be clear in those arrangements who's responsible for what. So these are the things to think of. There are, you know, it says that there are no special rules. There aren't. It all comes down to being clear around proportionality, what should be shared, what that lawful basis is, and then consider those data protection principles and Caldicott principles in that everyday thought process. I mean, Andrew, from your perspective, coming back now into NHS, would you concur, or anything else that you would probably add to those types
absolutely.
of...
I mean, the thing that I pick out there from what you've just said, and kind of what I came in with a second ago, with things moving in the right direction, the Caldicott principles were updated to essentially say, and I'm paraphrasing here, but to essentially say you can harm people as much by not sharing information as you can harm them by actually sharing information. And I think that's probably been part of the cultural shift. I'm sure some people in the that are watching today will remember Dawn Moynihan, who used to be Director of Information Governance for NHS England. And she was very much quoted as saying something very, very similar to that prior to it becoming one of the Caldicott principles. So I think that's a really important point, and it kind of underlines the points that you make about Baby P and Victoria Climbié, and, you know, all of those other horrible cases that you've just put up on the screen there, that no one has ever criticized these people for sharing too much information. Those reports have always said not enough has been shared. So I can see my slides come up on the screen there. So we're thinking about the benefits of sharing information, of data sharing. So I've pulled out 5 of them to just share with you here. You can see them on the screen there for you. So I'm going to start with improved decision making. So when different agencies share accurate, up-to-date data, decisions stop being based on guesswork and best guesses. Instead, policies can be grounded in hard evidence. So, for example, as we've said, come from a health care background, but health and social care teams can identify trends and allocate resources where they're most needed, rather than spreading them thinly across the whole of their area of responsibility. So it's about turning raw data into actionable insights. We can think about greater efficiency and cost savings. So data sharing cuts down on duplication. Think about how many times a citizen has to give the same information to different departments, each one storing it separately. That's why when you go to a healthcare setting, you go to your GP or you go to your hospital for an appointment, you're asked your basic information, your name, your address, your GP all of the time. They're checking all of the time to check you've got it, but it's trying to stop those sort of things happening repeatedly. So by sharing, we streamline processes and reduce waste if we possibly can. Sharing can improve the use of funds massively, which is a really huge thing when budgets are tight, as we're hearing all the time across public sector organisations. So related to that, it makes public services better. If we're talking housing, health, education systems, if they can talk to each other, citizens can get more personalised support and more timely support. But that talking has got to happen, got to work. So instead of being passed from one agency to another, people experience a smoother journey that builds trust in public services rather than that wariness we often hear about. Probably one of the most important ones, and it's related to that last one, is that better collaboration across different sectors and different parts of a sector. So there are complex challenges out there, such as homelessness or climate resilience. They don't fit neatly into one department. So shared data creates a common language for governments, charities, and even private organisations. And I don't want to get into the politics of that, but even private organisations to work together better to get a better outcome for the citizens or subjects of a country. And it's the foundation for real partnerships that deliver impact to those localities and to the citizens in that country. The last one I've got there on the screen is around faster or speedier responses to crises. So we're thinking when disaster strikes, those horrible times that we all experienced 4 or 5, probably nearly 6 years ago under pandemic, or a flood happens. So in those circumstances, speed really, really matters. Shared data really, really enables rapid coordination across emergency services, across health systems and local authorities. So instead of them scrambling for information, they can act decisively and they can save lives based on that easier and appropriate access to information. Dave, is there anything that you'd want to share, or anybody that's with us today would like to share about other benefits that you can think of?
I think there's a couple. I think just to lead on that last one, Andrew. I mean, in terms of going back in time to the pandemic, I mean, one of the ones that I use quite often around that is probably the shielding of vulnerable individuals. Yeah. And how that information was able to be, pulled together and actually shared across multiple agencies and actually even into third sector organizations. I mean, so across public services, that was, readily able to be shared to deliver the best possible services and provide targeted support. And that was the important thing. So I think that is probably one of the best examples that I can recall of during a crisis, being able to, share things effectively to really look at providing the best types of services to individuals. I mean,
and I think that example is a really good one, actually, because that even went down to corporate organizations. It went to supermarkets as well, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It went right down to the base level of having to feed people in an emergency situation.
Yeah, it's a great example. It's one that I often refer to because I was part of pulling together agreements on that at the time, and the ethos was that protecting vital interests of individuals, providing targeted support, and that's what that was based on. But I mean, just thinking of a couple of others that come to mind. I mean, I always look back at time, recently we've celebrated 20 years of the Wales Accord being in existence, and I was looking back at where we were in 2005. And just in terms of like technology advances, so for example in 2005, that's where we saw the introduction of chip and pin. And we all thought that was the bee's knees at that point in time, the first time we could actually go in with a card into a shop and pay for things without having to swipe it or to have to write the check and stuff. Technology advances over 20 years have been huge. Technology advances in the next 20 years are going to be equally huge. And it's actually engaging with that to look at opportunities that we've got. So let's think of it from, again, let's make it personal to us. If I go to see my GP and I've got a potential issue with my heart rate, what are they going to ask me to do? They're probably going to give, 20 years ago, they would have tried to cobble together some kind of monitoring thing to take home for you to monitor it and to bring a report back to them, or they're going to link you up to an ECG and they're going to see what that says at that point in time. A lot of us use smart devices now. We've probably got the likes of Fitbits or other smart devices. I shouldn't say Fitbits, I don't promote that. Could be any type of one. But the point is, we all use technology now in ways where actually intelligence sits behind it, and actually that type of intelligence that's there could be really important in providing more targeted and more streamlined, effective support to a person. So rather than going away for 2 weeks and monitoring your heart rate, or going away for 2 weeks and monitoring your blood pressure, we've actually got devices now that start doing these things for us, that we can take that intelligence into the GP and they will accept it. I mean, I'm a prime example of that. I did something about a year ago and took that with me, and I had that intelligence to go, well, this is what it's been for the past 2 weeks. That's where things are now compared to where they've been, and that's going to move over time. So, I mean, again, put yourself in the shoes of, if you wanted a service, how would you effectively get that? And how can we support in the most effective way? I'm not saying we've got to suddenly try and create information sharing agreements with the likes of Fitbit and everybody else, but the reality is intelligence sits behind products, and that's what we need to consider going forward. I mean, the only other one that probably strikes me on this list in terms of benefits is a little bit what I mentioned when it came to those headlines earlier. And for me, it's probably that preventing or reducing missed opportunities, because in these multi-agency safeguarding reports, you'll often, as I said earlier, you'll read all these things that says this is a missed opportunity, this was a missed opportunity. And it is just recognizing that if we identify the right agencies and the right partners that we should be working with, we could actually share things more intelligently and more quicker. So and it can only take one instance of information being shared with the right agency far more efficiently that could actually be a preventative measure. So that would probably be the other one that I could think of. Anybody else perhaps thinking of any other key benefits?
You've got producing better stats to improve health outcomes, for example, in immunisation take-up. So highly related to what we were talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, let's again think about those key challenges and risks, and that question I asked earlier, who's come across somebody saying data protection is the reason they can't do something, that barrier. But what are those key barriers that we've got? Well, first and foremost, actually, people, us, practitioners, it's that fear. The third one that's on that list, it's that fear of doing something that could be wrong, the fear of getting something wrong. And I think it's probably easier for the likes of myself and Andrew, and probably a lot of yourselves that work in this industry, because we understand the law and we understand the flexibility that we've got. But if you're a practitioner, if you're a social worker, if you're an education officer, do you really understand and have that feeling? That fear of doing something or sending something or relaying information judgments your thought process, and that's something that only we within our organizations can help educate, promote, and provide that confidence to our staff. And I think that's really important, which is, one of the reasons why I asked those questions at the start. I tend to, always like to ask those questions because you relate it to you as a person. So I think that's a really key thing, is people. Clearly, organizational risk appetite comes into it as well. We understand that every organization is different. How organizations manage their risks are going to be different. There isn't the one size fits all to that. But again, it's a common theme that we definitely come across, where people say why they've not done something or didn't consider doing it is because that organizational risk appetite and how you manage your risks might be that was a preventative measure of not doing something as well. I guess, Andrew, in terms of the others, anything you want?
Are you picking up the regulators, or have you covered that, Dave?
I think I kind of got the fear part, isn't it? Because it comes back into that people element, I guess, from that fear part, isn't it?
Yeah. And it comes back to what you were saying in earlier slides, really, in many respects, doesn't it? So thinking about culture or organizational silos, I think one of the biggest hurdles we've got, it's not technology, it's the mindset, which comes back to your first point, really, in many respects, Dave, around people, but it's the mindset of those people. And many departments in organizations still operate in that isolated way, guarding their data like it's treasure to them. And that can be done because of a fear of losing control, compliance worries, coming back to compliance, or simply that horrible old phrase of we've always done it this way. So we've got to work to break down those silos, and that will require trust to do that, clear governance and understanding of who owns what and who's doing what, and clear leadership that champions collaboration between departments rather than keeping those departments in those single siloed ways. So, and without that, even the best technology won't make a difference. It's the people that will make a difference. Thinking about technical and data quality issues, it's not just, and I think we've alluded to this already, it's not just about moving files around, paper files around. If the data's incomplete, inconsistent, or stored or in incompatible systems, it becomes a bit of a headache for us. So if we've got things like legacy platforms or lack of interoperability, poor metadata, that can slow everything down, and it can slow the sharing of data or even the sharing of appropriate data. And let's not forget, on top of that, that bad data will always lead to bad decisions, because you're making decisions on incorrect or incomplete data or information. So we need to set up some clear standards, use APIs to share information appropriately, and clean up the data before sharing it widely. Be clear that what we're sharing is appropriate to be shared, so it's appropriate for use by the people at the other end. I think this last one, lack of clarity in training, is a really, really important one. And it's one that the Information Commissioner will often come back to when things do go wrong, that training hasn't been deployed effectively. But even when the tech works and the culture is shifting, people will often ask, what exactly can I share? Who's responsible? What does the law say? And I'm sure any information governance and data protection practitioners in the room hear those questions on a daily basis. And without clear guidance, practical training, staff will come back to saying no, just to stay safe. So this is only going to create a bottleneck and frustrations within and between organizations when you're sharing information or needing to share information. So we need to build confidence through simple policies, role-based guidance, hands-on learning, to make data sharing feel safe and doable. But that getting training, and I'm using training in the broadest sense, that training and awareness is probably a better bit of terminology, effective, will help push away from those challenges and risks and get people confident in sharing information in the way that it needs to be shared. So back over to you, Dave.
Yeah, and I guess just before we move on, I mean, one of the important things to consider now is we've talked around when things go wrong. We've talked around, the challenges and the risks and barriers that we come across and the reasons for them. Before we move on to the next slide, it'd be quite interesting just to ask questions, see if we get some answers in the chat around how do you document your information sharing, and what types of challenges do you come across with getting documented information sharing? Because that's what this comes down to at the end of the day, is we identify that we can do something, and then the next part of the challenge is, well, how do we get an agreement with, partner A, B, and C? So just before we move on, I'd be interested to see if anyone's got any questions, or if they've got any examples of the types of challenges perhaps they've got then of, well, we've identified that we can do something. We've identified who our partners are. We've identified we've got a legal basis. How do we do it? How do we do it? Bearing in mind that organizations have a lot of these things. We have different risk appetite. We have different interpretations. Some of us will have different interpretations of what the law might allow us to do. How do we get over that? What kind of things are there to help us? And that'd be quite interesting to see anyone who's got anything. I think we've got a couple now. Yeah, often senior managers want to see everything that might not be appropriate. Yeah, it is difficult to say no. I totally agree with that. I think we've probably all been there, and unfortunately, I think what does happen is this is where you kind of end up creating that you become the big bad wolf. And I mean, over 20 years I've worked in this industry for now, and probably often I've been not liked. In fact, they got the wrong initials, DPP. I think they used to mean something else in some organizations, the data protections, and make the rest up. But I mean, what would be the case is that we would be the ones going, well, no, you can't have all of that. It's not appropriate to have it all. And all of a sudden you're seen as, well, you're the barrier. And I think that's what then stems within organizations, unfortunately, that they see data protection, GDPR being that barrier because you've said no to something. And it's not the case. It's because we've got to ensure whatever we do does it in a way that complies with our legislative requirements. That's what it comes down to. Yeah, templates are now being mentioned, so that takes us quite nicely, I think, onto the next slide, because we wanted to kind of set out, well, how would you do things? Because there are things there. I've always been one to say, don't reinvent the wheel. Many going back, I think this was around about 2007, within the organization I was at the time, we developed a privacy impact assessment template, now called the data protection impact assessment template. And it wasn't mandatory at that point in time. We were one of the very few first organizations to introduce it. But I always used to open my arms and open it up and go, right, if you want a copy of this and you want to use it, you want to plagiarize it and whatever, do it. It's there to be helpful. It's there to support us. Don't reinvent the wheel. Data sharing is exactly the same. We've got a number of things out there that can support this. So if you take the ICO data sharing code of practice, it's got a data sharing decision form within that, a template that you can use. And I've known organizations adopt that. I think it's a really powerful thing to do. It gives you that confidence. It's it's stamped by the ICO. It's something that they recommend. I think that's always a good thing to use. Within Wales, we've been extremely successful. We developed an information sharing protocol template. This started 20 years ago, but it's taken a long time to embed that into the culture of not just public services, but into the third sector as well within Wales.
Should be award-winning, Dave.
Well, I was going to say award-winning service as of last week, but I thought I'd leave that off. But we have been, extremely successful with that. We've got, fast approaching now 1,000 signatories to our standards, and that means that it commits that organisation in Wales to work to that template standard and the process that we've got. But the templates are there, right? They can be used if anybody wants to pick them up, whether you're in Scotland, Ireland, England, wherever you are, pick it up, use it, because it covers the key things that we're talking about. What information is being shared, what partners are involved, how that information is being appropriately shared, what privacy notices are in place. These things are there. They're free. We don't charge for these things. They're there. People can use them. there are other things. There's the government Annex 13 data sharing agreement model that's out there as well. Again, it's something that's free to use. Take those things. I don't know, Andrew, if you want to cover the NHS sample data sharing agreement.
I was just going to actually ask you on the Annex 13. Is that the Welsh government?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think they may be a wider government one, actually. That might be referencing a wider government one. I'd have to double check. But I mean, what I would say to any of you is Google can be our friend sometimes, and AI as well. And a lot of organizations use search for things, they're there. I mean, from a Wales perspective, we've got a suite of things. We don't just have information sharing protocol templates. We've got joint controller templates. We've got data processing agreement templates. These things are there. They're free to use. Use things that already exist and put them into your organization in a way that fits managing your own risks, I guess.
And yeah, I'm happy to pick up the NHS England data sharing agreement. I think it's called the data sharing and processing agreement, because it can be used in different ways depending on what you're actually using it for. But it's a really useful resource in as much as it ties in closely with their data protection impact assessment template as well. So you can pick fields, I suppose, from their data protection impact assessment to populate the data sharing agreement. So it's a really kind of fluid set of documentation. Probably does need condensing a little bit. It's quite long, I'm not going to lie. And I would, if I were writing it myself, I'd probably write it in a slightly more simplistic way. But particularly for people that are new to the field of work, I would, and again, particularly in the NHS, but it's usable beyond the NHS. I would direct you towards that as kind of the gold standard of what the central NHS agencies are directing you to do. I had I was going to say pleasure in inverted commas. I was on a working group that helped put them together. I didn't write them, but I was involved in the detailed commentary around those documents, and a huge amount of work went on behind the scenes to get them in a usable state for people to be able to use them effectively. I wish, and I'm perhaps going slightly off topic here, that there would be a greater directive from NHS England that NHS organisations all use them, because we're wonderful as IG professionals to, I'll point at you, Dave, and say, well, you couldn't possibly write a data sharing agreement template or a DPIA template that is any good. Mine's the best one there ever could be, and we won't all accept anyone else's. And we're as a sector, we're a little bit renowned or dreadful for that, and this points it all in the right direction.
There's a very good thing in the chat, actually, from someone that's referring to data sharing agreements and how difficult they can often be, particularly when you're trying to share with large companies, and often they'll have their own set of terms and conditions and no room for negotiation. I think we've all come across that.
Yeah.
And you genuinely, you feel that you're forced to have to accept it. And I think that just, reaffirms what you were just saying then, Andrew, and certainly is reminiscent to where we certainly were in Wales 20 years ago, because I remember extremely well that issue, that we were getting so many different versions of ISAs that were coming across our desk, that you had different standards, different terms and conditions, and that was one of the reasons why, and thankfully at the time, the Welsh Assembly and our Welsh government supported us with creating something that was standardised in Wales. But my point around it, more importantly, would be, yes, I can talk around the huge success we've had in Wales, but actually it's far easier in Wales because we're a very small, devolved nation. If you think about it, 22 local authorities, seven health boards. I mean, it's much easier to manage that. When you open that up to the wider UK level, it becomes a far more complex beast. But what I would say is that in most cases, we're already be working in partnerships. We're already be working in regional partnership boards. So actually trying to create things at the local regional level is something that could be successful. And I've seen it deployed in some areas of the UK where they've done that. And I think that that's probably something for people to take away, work within your local that local regional partnership, and see if you can create standardization across your core organizations in those areas, because just to avoid that, that comment that's in the chat, that's going to help. If you and your main partners agreed to a version of something you're going to use, it is really going to help you.
Having just come from a private company organisation that provides IT services, IT systems for the NHS, I can't tell you the amount of frustration NHS organisations created. I think they were about, the company I worked for had about 12 customer organisations, and each one of those customer organisations insisted on using a different template, didn't use the NHS England template, insisted on using their own template, and the IG professionals in those organisations would not budge. And it was an extremely frustrating position to be in, because they're trying to achieve the same thing in those 12 geographies.
Yeah, and there's another comment in there that, arguing over a template to use, waste months, and isn't helpful, and it costs money, and that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's trying to get your key partners to work together. It can be easier said than done, but if you can encourage that type of approach, it's really going to help you as an organization to get around that sticky issue of different types of agreements, different terms and conditions. I mean, slightly off topic, but if you think around the data processing agreement issues that we come across on a regular basis, that liability insurance part of it, you're never going to have a single bullet, and you're never going to have an answer that's going to make everybody happy. But if you've got 90% of a template that you're all happy with, isn't it far easier to spend your time discussing that 10% that's open for interpretation, as opposed to the full documentation?
So just with some awareness of time, I can see we're coming up to 1:45. I'm going to take us into a document that I'm sure some of you will already know. The overarching title of it is information sharing, advice for practitioners providing safeguarding services for children, young people, parents and carers. But within that document, there's a set of 7 golden rules of information sharing, and they are part of that government guidance for safeguarding practitioners. They're designed to help professionals share information appropriately, lawfully, and especially when working with children and vulnerable individuals. But they are designed for working with children and vulnerable individuals, but they work as principles across many, many sectors. So I'm just going to quickly summarize what those 7 golden rules are. So we've got the first one there. It says safety first. Really, it should say child safety comes first. But if you take the point that it's a little bit more applicable if you want it to be across other sectors. So protecting an individual from harm always outweighs protecting privacy. It always, always does. The UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act give you a legal framework to share information when not sharing could put an individual at risk. So that same point that we were making earlier, that it's as harmful not to share sometimes as it is to share. The law is there to help you act, not very much not to help to hold you back. The second point that it makes is engage if it's safe. So talk to the individual or their carers about what you're sharing, who with and why. However, if telling them could increase the risk, like a carer might react violently or the person might withdraw, it equally would be appropriate not to engage with them. Safety has always got to take the priority over that level of transparency. Legal basis. I mean, we haven't gone through the 7 legal, the not 7, but the legal bases today in any detail. But it's important that you don't need consent to share if someone is at risk, and it's that point that people, if people are at risk, you can share with impunity if it's going to stop harm coming to them. You don't need the lawful guardian, but safeguarding will usually provide that for you. Always aim for openness and cooperation where you can, and consider any objections, but override them if sharing is necessary to protect the individual. Consent isn't always necessary. If you're unsure, onto our 4th point there, seek advice. Don't delay. That can cause further harm if you delay, if you're unsure. Speak to a manager, a safeguarding lead, a data protection officer. If you're in health and care, a call-a-court guardian. Never leave someone at risk because you're worried about criticism. Always go away and get that right advice to help you act appropriately. The next one is about protecting identity. So when sharing, make sure that details that could put someone in danger, like a child, a carer or witness, are kept as safe as possible. Don't leave them lying around in offices, for example. Think about what could happen if those details fell into the wrong hands. And this always brings me back to there was an advertising campaign that the ICO did a matter of months ago, probably 6-8 months ago now, where one piece of information was shared by accident, and it caused a whole massive uproar in people's lives, that they had to move house, they had to move school, they had to move town, etc., etc. One simple admin error can result in a massive set of turmoil for an individual and a family. I think this sixth one in the middle at the bottom there, about only showing what's needed, is highly clear in all of the guidance that's out there. It's clear in the data protection legislation. It's clear in the Caldecott principles that you only share and use what is needed. You give the right information to the right people at the right time, those involved in safeguarding or supporting the individual. We should avoid, if we possibly can, sending entire case files. Stick to just the relevant parts. I was dealing with a case the other day where the police wanted medical records, and it was following an incident where there'd been a fight in an ED A&E department, and that whole record was not necessary. That instance of the person being punched after the event of that fight in the ED department was what was relevant, not the whole case file. And we're good to push back on those things when people equally ask us for those things. And it's something, I don't know if we've got any solicitors in the room, so I'm not going to look you in the eye if I have, or if we have. But from experience, solicitors quite frequently will come and say, I want somebody's medical record. And I think we're good to push back very often and say, we will provide you with the relevant information, not the whole record as you've asked for. I'm not going to cover the last one there, because if we move on to the next slide, it's exactly what Dave is going to talk about, but it's effectively about recording your decisions to cover yourself with any decisions that you make. Dave, over to you.
Yeah, I think I've taken this from one of my fellow colleagues that used to use this phrase constantly, Mr. Barrymore. The key for me to achieving assurance is document, and it is those words that I'll always say is document, document, document. If you're sharing information, make sure you've got a record of what you've shared, why you've done it. I mean,
he says it's going to be on his tombstone.
It probably will be, but it's absolutely spot on. It is the key to things. I mean, sometimes you'll have that ad hoc one-off data sharing that needs to take place, and sometimes the documenting of that will take place after the event, and don't be afraid if that's the case. I can, recall an incident many years ago, a significant incident that was taking place in the city centre, where I had officers come to me going, well, we can give access to that, but we need them to fill out this piece of paperwork. And I just said, I don't care about the piece of paperwork right now. They need that right now. It's life and death. It's vital that we give it to them, and we worry about the documentation afterwards. And I think that's important as well, because a lot of what we talk around is sometimes that regular two-way reciprocal data sharing, but sometimes it will be that stuff that's needed there and then in an emergency crisis at that point in time. So yes, we do need to make sure that we've got a document and we've got that evidence that backs it up, but don't be afraid that there'll be occasions where perhaps we have to do something and we worry about documenting it afterwards. But the key is have that there, because that ends up being a critical component then to demonstrate why we've done something. What was that basis you relied upon? What was the thought process? And it comes back to my point at the start. Where would you rather be stood in front of, a regulator or coroner? Because either way, the key is that you need to be able to set out why you've done something within your organisation at that point in time.
Thanks, Dave. So I think that brings us to the end of our session, but we were keen to give you some takeaways from today. We've talked a lot for nearly an hour there, and we were keen to just pull together a few things for you. So I think we've got 3 that you can see on the screen there. The first one is always know your purpose before sharing. So before you share anything, stop and ask, why am I sharing it? What's the goal? Is it to safeguard a child, improve care, to coordinate services? If you can't clearly explain your purpose, you probably shouldn't be sharing that information, because the purpose drives everything. What you share, who you share it with, how much detail you include. That's a key takeaway. The second I would give is give full regard to those 7 rules. And like I say, the 7 golden rules, they aren't just for social workers. They're good practice for anyone handling sensitive, and it's personal information there, which is obviously what we're talking about here. But things like share only what's necessary, keep it secure, record your decisions, back to the point Dave's just making there. They help you balance safety, they help you balance privacy, and they help you balance accountability. So even if you're in housing, health, and other public services, those principles, they do still apply. And coming back full circle to Dave's last point there, document everything for assurance. Whatever you decide, share or not, and it can be a decision not to share, write that down, document it. Note what you shared, why, who you shared it with, and if you said no, record that too. I'm dealing with one at the moment in a separate life. I'm pro bono data protection officer for a school, a religious-based school, and the diocese wants a whole load of personal information about the children, and I've had to say no, and I've made myself very, very unpopular with the diocese. But I believe it's the right decision to do that. And I mean, I've documented it in an email. It's very, very clearly documented out and stored. So good documentation protects you. It shows transparency, and it helps others understand your reasoning. And I always think, even if your reasoning ends up being wrong, you've come to a logical decision rather than finger in the air. So if you've come to the wrong decision, I don't think the Information Commissioner or anybody else is going to criticise you for that if you've come to it logically. They might tell you to put it right, but they're not going to criticise you for it. And it's your safety net if any questions come up later. Dave, I don't know if you wanted to say anything to just give a wrapping up word as well.
No, I think, Andrew, the only other thing that I would say to people is what I've reiterated throughout, really, and that is, apart from document, I'd probably be saying, don't reinvent the wheel. There are templates out there, there are models of work out there that are effective and work, but use them. These things are free. They're all free. Nobody's going to bite you for taking somebody's template and doing something with it that meets the needs for your organization. Use stuff that's out there, because we've all been part of this for many, many years. I've been part of this for approaching 20 years now. The challenges that we have around data sharing, use templates that are there. They're there for a reason. And if in doubt, ask. That would be the other thing. Use your networks, use your practitioner networks. I think that's a really key thing. Absolutely. Build up practitioner networks. Things like this, the DPAS conference that happens every year. Sorry, I'm doing a bit of plugging for them now, but actually it's a really good community network to get to speak to other people, because we all come across the same issues, the same problems.
The strategic IG network groups that run across England, that are run for health and care, are really, really valuable. Dave, we've got a question in there as to how the new legislation, the Data Use and Access Act, will affect future data sharing arrangements. I don't think in the big scheme of things it will change a lot. It frees some things up. It allows things like research easier. I'm not going to even attempt in 2 minutes to go into any detail.
No, I think there's something around legitimate interests as well that will be a little bit more detailed in there. But again, it actually provides more clarity, and it frees things up even more, I would say, it does. Yeah. But if anybody is interested in that, we will be reviewing our own templates as well from a WAPS perspective. So we will be covering those bits off. So pinch what we're doing if you really want to.
Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up? Can't see anyone. I'm not sure if you can tell on. Oh, here we are. Will DPAS have a course on DPA? Do you mean the Data Use and Access Act? I'm presuming you mean by that. Sorry, it's gone from my screen. Yes. I don't know. I'll leave DPAS to answer on that one. I can't believe they won't, but I'll leave them to answer that. Megan.
Thanks, Dave and Andrew, for that session. That's really interesting, and thanks everyone for the engagement. We do have a course on that topic, so we can send that out in in an email. But yeah, thank you everyone. That was great. We hope you enjoyed it, and we can do training on data sharing as well to further your support. So thanks for attending, and we hope to see you on future webinars with DPAS.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.